What is going on YouTube? Gamus here and welcome to the 46th episode of the Tech Pills live stream. So let's start right off with the first news of today and the one that's in the title. You guys were actually quite impatient to know what this is all about. So Audacity has been recently acquired by a group called the Muse Group, and the new maintainers immediately started doing some questionable things. So about a week ago, the Muse Group, which is the group of people behind the Muse score engraving program, acquired Audacity, the extremely popular audio editing tool that we all know and love. This new turn of events has received mixed reactions from the community because, well, I mean, Audacity is kind of a staple as far as any software goes, not just free and open source software. Audacity is in fact one of the most popular audio editing applications out there, probably because of the fact that it's free, but it's actually also pretty good. So this big change in leadership or not necessarily a change in leadership, but this new acquisition definitely sounds weird and surely makes some eyes toward. One of the most important points as part of the new mission with Audacity from the Muse Group is to improve usability and add non-destructive editing, which is all fine and good. I mean, these are all very needed features of Audacity. So I wouldn't be happier about that. But it already started with some very weird and honestly sketchy ideas as part of the announcement. So as part of the announcement of this acquisition, the Muse Group said, and I'm quoting, "Just as with MuseScore, users can expect optional cloud services, file storage, sharing, etc., but such capabilities are optional and the software is fully featured and fully functional without this." So it already sounds pretty weird. Having paid services connected to an open source project could slowly make a transition towards being some proprietary crap that's possibly even just completely cloud based. And that's what I fear the most from this acquisition. Of course, this is just speculation on my part, and um, we have no reason to believe that they're going to move towards this direction. Of course, it does make sense for an open source project to try to make money, and I am not against that. In fact, I am very willing to be able to contribute to open source software as far as I can, be it with contributions, with code or translations, or even with some monetary contributions. But having like integrating features that are paid and that you cannot access, that are reliant on some cloud service to an open source project, that sounds sketchy. I don't like where this is going. If you want to make like a website that gives you access to, I don't know, um, sound files, that gives you, I don't know, a Nextcloud instance, and that's in a way connected to Audacity, and the profit from those services contribute to Audacity, well, that's something that I can actually get behind. But having like full featured cloud services inside of Audacity doesn't really sound very good. Let's jump to the chat. Gert Roberts says, Gert Bors says, is there going to be a fork? We're getting to that. This is actually even more complicated because this is not all of what has been, well, this is all that's been announced, to be fair. But some new recent developments as of today make things even worse. If you have a look at Audacity's GitHub repository, you look at pull request 835, you see that the new developers and the new maintainers are trying to introduce some telemetry into Audacity. And I want to start off by saying that there's nothing wrong inherently with having telemetry in an open source application. Ubuntu has telemetry, and many other applications that I really love using do have telemetry in them. Of course, most of them are opt-in, and they ask you the first time you start the application if you want to opt into the telemetry. And of course, it's a big help for the developers to understand, to find out about new bugs, and to understand how people actually use their applications. So I am not personally against telemetry, and this sentiment of mine apparently is shared among most of the people that actually complain about this. The real issue here is that they're trying to use a very invasive telemetry system that's based on Google Analytics and Yandex Metrica. If you don't know, Google and Yandex, which is basically the Russian version of Google, it's just another big company, but instead of being based in the United States, it's based in Russia. And it's a search engine that also provides other services just like Google. So Google and Yandex are two of the most privacy invasive companies out there. And according to the pull request, part of the information that would be shared if this changes make it true are IP addresses of the people using Audacity, as well as other information and very opaque information that's not really easy to discern for the user on the usage of Audacity. To be honest, I really think that this is a very, very bad move, and I am not alone thinking that. If you have a look at the pull request, and I'm opening it right now, oh, it changed. Okay, sorry. This is a new development. This is a very recent story, so it makes sense for it to change very rapidly. So you know what? Let's actually have a look at what's going on here. Let me see if I can easily share my screen here. Just give me a second. Hell. Okay, let's just do this instead. Okay, that works. All right. So this is a very new development. Last time I refreshed the page, this hasn't been edited. And in fact, it's been edited 3 times. 2 times 3 days ago and other 2 times 4 hours ago. So, dear all, due to the large amount of worry about this pull request, which we completely understand, we want to clarify exactly what's going on. Telemetry is strictly optional and disabled by default. This is actually good. No data is shared unless you choose to opt in and enable telemetry. Telemetry only works in the builds made by GitHub CI from the official repo. The telemetry URLs are only defined there. If you're compiling Audacity from source, we will provide a CMake option to enable the telemetry code. This option will be turned off by default. Okay, this is actually a lot better than what it used to appear prior to this edit, because the narrative there was we're going to use Google Analytics and Yandex metric to collect data about the users and to know how they're using the application and blah blah blah. And I mean, the intention is good, just the tools, they are not up to par with what free and open source software should represent. Why have telemetry at all? Essentially, it's to help us identify product issues early. Audacity is widely used across several platforms, so we have no information on the application and on the application stability. It's difficult for us to estimate the size of the user base. Blah blah blah. We need a way to make informed decisions about which OS versions to support. Okay, this is interesting and scary. For example, we can raise the minimum version of macOS to 10.10 to update the WX widgets to the latest version. Okay, this is a very accurate example that they're giving, because my interpretation of this is, should we drop support for some Linux distributions that we don't care about supporting because maybe the user base is too small, say Gentoo or Arch or whatever? This already sounds pretty bad, to be honest. And considering how big the user base of Audacity is, we could even see them dropping official support for Linux completely. Maybe they're going to switch to some proprietary widget toolkit and just be done with it. We don't know. Surely the way that they've managed these they didn't announce anything. This used to be a pull request for adding basic telemetry for Audacity. It was just that. So there was no discussion with the community. There was no announcement, hey, we're going to bring telemetry into Audacity. What do you think? Something like that. Nothing of this sort happened. This is a reaction to the overwhelmingly negative feedback that this pull request generated. And we know about this only because people on Reddit found it and decided to post it and to let people decide what they thought about it. And I'm talking about this because I saw it on Reddit. And they didn't announce anything. No major news site reported on this because they made no official statement prior to this decision. They started working on it, and in fact, there are 29 commits dating back to 3 days ago and going so far as to yesterday, as far as yesterday. So 29 commits spread across 3 days of work. They just decided that they wanted to do this, and they didn't tell the community anything. This makes me mad, because this is what ruins an open source project. Taking decisions that are very polarizing, that the community doesn't want. We use Audacity because we want to use it. We don't pay for it. We're not paid to use it. It makes sense that it's us to decide where the application should go. And this is always the case, of course, with open source software. If you are the developer, or if you're in charge, or if you have any kind of power on what the application is going to be, you can do basically whatever you want, and that's for sure. And if people don't like where you're going, they're gonna fork it. But of course, it doesn't really make sense, because if they're trying to improve Audacity, they're doing it to make the life of its current users better, not to make it worse. If they want to improve Audacity, they shouldn't give people the necessity to fork it and to actually to remove unwanted features such as telemetry. Anyway, with this announcement, they're saying that this is optional, that this is going to be turned off by default, that the code for telemetry can be removed altogether. So it's okay, I guess. Let's move on with this announcement. Let's see where it's going. Regarding the concerns about the choice of providers, we do not incorporate cross-site tracking, limiting the ability to identify the user by both Google and Yandex. This is really not the point, because if Google or Yandex has your IP address, they can track you. And they said in the original announcement that they not announcement, I'm pretty sure that in the original pull request, they said that the IP address would be reported. Let me see if I can roll back to a previous version. Apparently I cannot. Oh well. Anyway, it's a fact that it's gonna share the IP address because it's making a request to a Google or Yandex server, so it makes sense that the IP address is automatically shared. Yandex will not really see the application open event to help us estimate the size of the user base. Again, this is enough to share your IP address and to link that to the rest of your online identity. And by the way, limiting the ability to identify the user, this is a straight out lie. Because again, you're giving your IP address. The moment your PC, your computer, you open up Audacity with this new tracking feature, and you make a web request to whatever server, okay? That server is going to store your IP. That's just a fact. And unless you're using something like a VPN or a Tor, this is going to be the case. And this is an identifying information. So this is just a lie. Google would only receive session start and end events, errors of debugging, file formats used for import and export, OS and Audacity version. Okay, this is actually already pretty creepy and pre-identifiable OS and Audacity version. Use of effects generators and analysis tools to prioritize future improvements. This is very invasive because it's basically going to tell Google and the developers, of course, as well, what you do with Audacity, and with a pretty high precision level. Because if you're using a noise suppressor and, I don't know, a compressor and something else in Audacity, it's very likely that you're cleaning up a recording. So who would clean up a recording, like a voice recording? I don't know, someone like me that posts videos online, or someone who hosts a podcast. Not many people actually do those kind of stuff. And you have this plus the IP address, and you have the exact identification of the person that's using Audacity. And if you combine that with other algorithms that can be used on top of the use of effects generators and analysis tools to prioritize future improvements, this actually makes me laugh. If you combine this information on who the person is with how they use the tool, you can basically get an understanding of how the people behaves, and maybe make ads that behave in a certain way to let the user maybe not think that that's an ad, to make the user interact with the advertisement, or to manipulate them in another way, say filter bubble or um, political influence, something like that. This is all the stuff that Google already does, so it's nothing really new. Okay, final point. We will consider replacing Google and Yandex with another service if we find one that fulfills our requirements. And this means we will not do that. We're telling you this because we're not willing to search for a better solution because we have the easy solution. We're not going to change that. Just to reiterate, telemetry is completely optional, of course, yes, but is it going to be optional forever? Is it going to be disabled forever? Are the binaries that you're going to download from Audacity's website going to be having the telemetry disabled by default forever? Who knows? Anyway, let me switch back to the camera. So interesting stuff here. A very new development. This is the first time that it actually happened. That I'm covering a story and then it changes under my nose. But it was interesting nonetheless. So just to wrap up this news item about Audacity, apparently the community is already very eager to fork Audacity and create a purely free and open source version. So if that's your concern, if as long as it's open source software, no one will be ever able to take it from us, to change it in a way that's irreparable, because we have the source code. We can do whatever we want with it. And honestly, I'm not too worried. I am disappointed that they're going in this direction, but at the end of the day, there's not really too much we can do about it because it's their code. They can do whatever we want with it. But since it's copyleft, since it's free software, it's also our code and we can do whatever we want with it. So at the end of the day, I think that as long as the software is free, everything will be fine, I guess. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. I actually skipped a week for this episode, so we have some other big news to cover here. I will quickly go through it because it's already being covered by other news outlets and YouTubers, and I'm just gonna report it and give you my 2 cents about it. So the University of Minnesota, students from the University of Minnesota tried to sneak vulnerabilities into the Linux kernel and got banned for it. First of all, it was a bad move. It was not something that you should do because they abused their the trust that they gained with the Linux maintainers, the Linux kernel maintainers, to introduce known vulnerabilities into the code for the Linux kernel so that they could publish a paper about it. They actually published a research that was basically stating that TLDR was, well, open source software is not really secure because you can sneak vulnerabilities into the code. And of course, that's not the case, because open source code, particularly very popular software, is always going to be audited. And there are always going to be tools that are going to scan the source code and try to find these kind of errors that are basically the kind of memory bugs that you can introduce when you write C code. And we're getting better at automatically identifying them and fixing them. So this is not really going to work in the long run. And since this was an actually very high profile bad move from the students, it's very possible that it's not going to happen again. As far as we know, no malicious code has actually been able to go into any Linux kernel that's shipping in a distribution. And as a result of this move, the University of Minnesota was banned from contributing to the Linux kernel. And all patches from email addresses coming from that university are being reverted. So it's not easy task. They actually, so the Linux kernel maintainers decided that the University of Minnesota is now a known bad actor and that they should not be trusted, and that anything that they've committed, any contribution that they've made, is subject to scrutiny and is basically seen as inherently malicious. So, first of all, this was a huge waste of time for the kernel maintainers just to publish a stupid paper about something that's basically just social engineering that can happen at all scales. And they abused the trust of the kernel maintainers. And it's someone made like a an analogy with stealing cars just to test if they're resistant to stealing. Of course, I can't remember the exact analogy. Anyway, the very bad thing here is that it worked to some extent. Again, it didn't ship in any actual Linux kernel, but if this paper wasn't to be published, this change would probably have gone unnoticed, and we would now have a backdoor in the Linux kernel, which is something we should be worried about. We should know that this is a possibility, and that in general, the open source community has to be very careful about what code they allow in their project. So if you're developing a sort of high profile open source software application, you have, of course, to know that this kind of stuff can happen. And you should probably be on the lookout. You should probably be on the lookout for this kind of behavior, because at this point, anything is fair game, I guess. So still, the Linux kernel is one of the biggest open source projects out there, and I don't think this would have gone unnoticed. It's a possibility, but I don't really think so. I think that someone would have spotted something wrong here. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. I just wanted to give you a little update on System 76 Cosmic desktop environment. So in the last episode, I reported on System 76 announcing the Cosmic desktop environment, and I wanted to update on this news because I reported something that was technically wrong, and I wanted to correct myself. So in the previous episode, I said that Cosmic is a fork of GNOME Shell. Apparently it's not. I was wrong, because while the complexity of the changes they made on top of GNOME made me originally think that it actually was a fork, it turns out it's instead a collection of extensions for GNOME 3.38. This makes it much more interesting, as a hard fork would have been problematic, resulting in System 76 having to maintain a full-on desktop environment along with a distribution and with the hardware that they're shipping, which is no easy task. I think that having this Cosmic desktop being based around extensions is actually a better idea, because it allows them to focus on the changes that they want to make to the GNOME user experience. This really goes to show how powerful GNOME extensions can be, by the way, and how much they can change the core user experience. And I'm pretty happy that they're trying to do it this way. This is actually a very interesting new concept for a desktop. Well, not entirely new, but the combination of very interesting things, and I really like the direction that they're taking here. So they announced that Cosmic is going to come in June, including the new release of Pop! OS 21.04. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'll probably check it out, and if there's anything that I haven't already talked about, I will probably report back on it. All right, moving on to the last news of today. Rota Jakiro is a newly discovered Linux malware that has been lurking around since 2018. So I just wanted to report on these news because not much is known at this point. Rota Jakiro is a malware that's named after the people that actually discovered it and identified it. It's a particularly clever piece of malware that uses a combination of encodings to make itself undetectable, including zlib compression, AES, XOR, and key rotation. It's a particularly dastardly piece of code because it's very difficult to identify and very difficult to spot on a system, as it's really, really clever. At this time, the real purpose of this malware remains unknown, which is kind of scary, but speculations, according to some speculations, it's probably a part of some botnet aimed at running DDoSs that is still probably lying dormant. This particular piece of malware seems to be targeting vulnerable IoT systems. So the kind of, I don't know, smart devices that you have around your home that probably run old and non-updated versions of the Linux kernel in the background, and since no one bothers to patch them and they're connected to the internet, of course, they're going to be vulnerable. This really goes to show how bad IoT is how badly it's being implemented, because there's nothing inherently wrong with IoT. I mean, if I want to connect my TV or lights to the internet, I'm pretty sure that that's a decent idea. Well, not really connecting them to the internet. I don't think that having these devices accessible through a global network actually does make any sense. But having like smart devices for controlling lights and small electronics and electronics around your house does make sense. But I wouldn't really connect them to the internet. My idea of IoT is an internet-free, Internet of Things scenario where most of the devices, well, ideally the devices that would have smart features would be completely standard and open source. So stuff based around known stuff like the ESP32, which is very popular for IoT stuff, and say the Raspberry Pi. If those are based around standard technologies, then you can just update them because they're going to be updated anyway with your standard distribution packages, and then have just some small software that's very unlikely to be vulnerable to anything, controlling the actual, I don't know, actuators or relays for turning on or off lights and stuff like that. That's my idea of IoT personally. And having these devices connected to the internet doesn't really make too much sense to me. It's obviously a bad idea because no company is going to keep updating, I don't know, your fridge for 10 years or your smart light bulbs for 10 years. That's just not something that light bulb companies or fridge companies really want to do. This also goes to show how Linux is not perfect as far as security goes. Of course, it's a lot better than proprietary systems, mainly because of the fact that many people have eyes on the Linux kernel and on Linux distributions in general and on open source software in general. So it's very difficult to have a vulnerability in the system without it being promptly spotted and fixed. The only problem is that for the issue to be actually fixed, you need to update your device. And if you have non-standard devices that run on non-standard versions of the Linux kernel that are not mainline, then you're going to have a problem there. That's really the biggest problem with Linux devices in the wild. While in the x86 world and with standard devices like Raspberry Pis or the Pinebook, or any device really that's supported by a mainline Linux kernel, this is not really an issue, because if it's mainline, I can just, even if the manufacturer doesn't provide me with an update, if it's all in the mainline kernel, I can just build it myself and install it if I want to. If I want to keep that old device around, I can do that, or the community can take care about it. But if it's an out of tree device that's not really supported by anything but a very ancient and specific version of the Linux kernel that's been botched together to work with that specific device, then there's not really too much you can do about that. If you want to scan your system just in case to see if it has been compromised, your best bet is to use on Linux to use ClamAV. ClamAV is a very good open source antivirus software that can scan the entirety of your system. If you read the Arch Wiki page about ClamAV, it's actually pretty well written, and you will find all the information you need there. Alright guys, this is gonna wrap it up for today's episode of the Tech Pills live stream. I just wanted to make a very quick announcement before actually ending this. Because of a combination of events in my life, I am deciding right now to pause, to take a break from live streaming. I don't want to stop live streaming like in general, because I actually really enjoy doing this, even if my following isn't too big, but you guys seem to enjoy it as well as I do, so it's not going away forever. It's just that at this point in my life, I really cannot keep live streaming for a while. So until further notice, this is gonna be the last episode of the Take Pills live stream. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that followed me, both live and offline, like watching the video afterwards, as well as all the people that have always watched my videos and supported me and helped me grow, and all that kind of stuff, the typical stuff that your standard YouTuber would say. I do not really have that big of a following, but I do have a following, and I'm really grateful to you guys that actually to actually like the content that I do, to actually enjoy listening to my babbling and all that kind of stuff. So that's it. It's going to be a while since it's going to be a while till the next live stream, but it's going to come back eventually. So guys, thanks for watching, I guess. If you like this video, please press the thumbs up button down there, and also remember to subscribe to my channel if you want more of this. Videos aren't going away. I haven't been making videos for a while, but I'm working on something right now. I'm working on it, so videos are not going to stop, even if I publish like once every 4 years. I don't know, but be on the lookout for a new video. So thank you again very much for watching. Join the TechPills community, techpills.technology/community. Use the QR codes here on the left side of the screen, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.